Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Boy, am I excited for this episode today. Before I introduce our guest, here is one of the longest quotes, but it's the perfect quote for this episode. So bear with us here. Here it is, one of my favorite quotes. Anyone who wants to know the human psyche will learn next to nothing from experimental psychology. He would be better advised to abandon exact science, put away his scholar's gown, bid farewell to his study, and wander with human heart through the world. There, in the horrors of prisons, lunatic asylums, and hospitals, in drab suburban pubs, in brothels and gambling halls, in the salons of the elegant, the stock exchanges, socialist meetings, churches, revivalist gatherings, and ecstatic sects, through love and hate, through the experience of passion in every form in his own body, he would reap richer stores of knowledge than textbooks a foot thick could give him. And he will know how to doctor the sick with a real knowledge of the human soul. Carl Gustav Jung, however it's pronounced. Our guest today lives this quote, has been healing the sick and helping people of all walks of life since probably before the textbooks and the academics. And we're going to learn all about that today, but both nationally and internationally. Our guest today, Chief Visionary Officer, Victory, and, acclaimed speaker, both nationally and internationally, author of a book I've been reading, The Life of Victory, Mastering the Secret of Choosing Love Over Fear. Eric Guy is here to join us for the first time, first of many, on the Culture Matters podcast. I'm so excited to have you on, my friend. And I can tell you, the audience, you got to follow Eric because I've watched him be himself in a bunch of environments, and he's the real deal. So thanks for coming on the show, brother. And thanks for letting me read that book.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for this is actually really exciting. I feel honored to be on this and to be part and just uh, feel really honored just to have gotten to meet you, Jay. It's like um, I feel like our souls were brought together intentionally, and man, I can't wait. I know you're going to be on my podcast as well, and that's probably going to be one of many because I love how you just stretch me intellectually to just think differently, and I really appreciate that quote. Really appreciate that quote because that's a true belief that I have of just getting out there, doing it, and seeing what's out there, not just spending your time in a textbook.
When you're talking about us connecting, I feel I had guilt come about. I definitely need to shout out Brian Hess for introducing us. He's
Yes.
like a guardian angel of mine. So that's just the one last thing I want to say before I ask you about this quote. What resonates about it outside of some? I think I know what you mean, but why this quote for our audience? What do you think it is that's so um, useful for like what we'll be talking about today?
Well, I think there's people that can talk about it, and I think there's people that can do it. Um, that comes down to that. I mean, when you look at things, and I always grew weary, and not that my training wasn't good, and not that I didn't have, you know, some solid teachers along the way and professors along the way, but it really was getting out there doing it. And as you're like, I'm counting all those places that I've been, like I've been in prisons, I've been in residential settings with kids and churches, and you're naming off all those places, and
Wow.
I'm like, yeah, there was you know there all those places that I've been in and have gotten a lot of experience in, because those type of places and those type of people really bring out the good and the bad of us.
Mm.
They release, they can um, release what is kind of going on inside of us if you see it as a lesson, right? And they can help us grow and help us get better. In my case, it was as a clinician, and then now basically just transferring that over into the business world as I have. It's, it's just amazing. But I do believe that you have to get out there and do it. Not only do it, but one of the things that I always say is you really can't take anybody anywhere you're unwilling to go yourself.
Mm,
You have to go to those dark places. You have to deal with your own mess. You have to deal with your own story, and that's one of the reasons that I wrote the book. I mean, that's my story. I mean, good, bad, or otherwise, that's it. And I had to deal with all that. I mean, there was a person that was raised from that was very reactive, and out of the ashes there came a person that at least most of the time is responsible, with having that same story come about, but dealing with it differently and seeing it through a different lens.
mm. The prisons. Uh, what was the first one you're in?
So I was in a full lockdown for kids.
Whoa.
Yeah. And that's how I got to where I'm at today, because I did not realize the talent that I had working with people. It was an executive director that pulled me side of that place that ran the whole place. And it was a miserable place, but it didn't bother me. Like, I enjoyed it. Like, whether that's sick or demented, I just enjoyed it because this was the worst of the worst. These
Wow.
were these were still only young men who were literally locked up, and the staff that worked there, it was like awful. The one gentleman that went in with me ended up not finishing because he had a mental breakdown, because it's all the stuff you would see, and I'm not just talking from the kids, from the staff and everything. And that gentleman pulled me aside, the executive director, and he said, you have a skill, you don't even know what you're doing. And and he helped me get to where I was at. Like, he helped me
Mm,
get into a graduate program and things like that, which I never thought I'd be doing.
really?
Yeah, it was just, that's how it was. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed because I lived it. I kind of understood where it was, and what I understood. I think, I mean, I probably couldn't have articulated it back then, but
Mm,
what I understood at some level was, like, I can get healing out of this, because these people are just revealing to me what's broken inside of me too. And I saw it. There were times where it was hard to see that, but almost as a favor. Especially working with younger men that are just very reactive and things like that, as I was growing up. But even more so, sometimes it was just like, wow, they're getting me to a point where I want to react towards them. Uh,
mm.
and that's how I used to regulate my own behavior, was to push buttons to get people going, um, and fight. And I was like, wow, like, this is effective. But I always tell people, if you really want to work on your issues like that, get around somebody, especially a kid that has had significant trauma. And not only will you learn about them, you're going to learn about yourself tremendously through that process if you want to.
What was it like being around the foster system?
Um, at first, very frustrating, just because a lot of the things that we're doing are backwards.
Mm,
We're doing everything backwards. We're not doing a great job. There are great people out there that are doing a good job educating the foster parents and the agencies and things like that. But when you have a organization or organizations, and meaning the organizations themselves that run the programs, but organizations like families that are reactive, you can't help a child get out of their own reactivity if the structure is reactive in and of itself. It's not healing. It's
wow.
physiologically, it can't happen. And that's how I had so much success, because I would go in and I would stay with people in their homes, stay with parents, and I would work with them. And they were like, when are you going to work with my kid? When are you going to work with my kid? We're not going to work with your kid. We get the family regulated. We get them physiologically, psychologically, emotionally regulated. And all of a sudden you bring that kid back into the picture a couple of days later, And they would literally say, these kids would just walk in sometimes and say, "What have you done with my parents?"
Where was that original epiphany? Let me start at the top management before I go to the employees. Like, was that an epiphany? Was that a combination of mentorship
Yeah,
or lived experience? Like, how did that idea come into play? Oh, I'm going to go. That's very ingenious.
yeah. I mean, I was basically is it was like, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing this? It was just a question because of what I think, mostly because of what I had gone through.
Mm,
And, I was very fortunate. Okay. I had a dad who could have completely wrote it off. He didn't, but he had significant trauma. He was a Vietnam vet. And, he still showed up at things, even though I didn't realize what he was struggling with, and there was no help back then. Um, and I didn't understand it until years later. And that's when we were able to actually make amends, um, and get the relationship on solid ground. But, to me, it's like we're doing all this stuff backwards with people. Like you want, in a business sense, you want employees to do the right thing. Well, they've got to see the example. Like, if they don't see it from the leader, um, then they're never going to want to do it themselves, right? It has to happen internally. When you have that internal switch, like with a parent, go off and they start becoming regulated and everything like that, we naturally want that. We're hardwired for connection. It doesn't matter how much trauma we have. We want it. Sometimes we just don't know how to get it. And when you create an environment, you have to fix the environment first before somebody that doesn't have any power, whether that being an employee, and in my case early on was kids, or younger teenagers. Um, but once you fix the structure around that, all of a sudden, boom, they were doing well. Um,
wow.
I got a gold coin right here next to my desk that I keep, and it's from a young man who gave that to me 2 years ago. And this young man, Jay, his parents called me in desperation. They had been through all kind of treatment and everything like that. Spent I don't know how much on all kind of different treatment and everything. And at this point in time, he was in high school, non-communicative with the family. Uh, they just wanted to get him through high school. That was the goal. That was the only goal, was to just get this poor kid, through high school. They had been through everything that told him it was all the therapy and things that said, "Hey, just work on the kid, work on the kid, work on the kid." I went in, worked with the family, and he did graduate high school. Then he went on. He graduated college, sigma cum laude.
Whoa.
Then the gold coin is from when he graduated from officer training school.
Really? Holy.
He Yeah, he is he is the navigator of our one of our ships in our military, and he is doing fantastic. I'm very proud of him. His parents are very proud of him, and actually formed a great friendship with the whole family. But I keep that as a reminder every day when I'm having a bad day, uh, because he was just in complete and utter turmoil. But we changed the structure, and it changed the way he did things, and he is unbelievably responsible today.
What are some debilitating behaviors that uh the principals of the organization, the family, the parents of the organization could be acting out, not privy to them. Imagine someone's listening to this that could be in a predicament where they're all eyes, the eye of Sauron is on the kids. Like, what could the parents be doing, or the dynamic of parents be doing, like debilitating reactive behaviors, or is it, yeah, maybe not even behaviors, but what does that look like?
Well, there's stress that's going on, for the parents, and they don't even understand. They don't even realize it. And sometimes that can happen even in a corporation, right? You have that grinding, that stress that's falling down from the leader. People can feel it. Nobody knows what it is, or some people might. But when you have a child that can articulate what those things are, they take on all that stress. All right. And it's physiological, right? We interact cellularly. And when, that communication that goes on unconsciously from cell to cell or person to person is very real. I mean, when you knock down that stress, it's amazing. So if you have parents and you knock out away that stress, and then all of a sudden, once you knock down that stress, what are the two leaders in the home doing? They're communicating better. They're talking to one another. They're supportive of one another. They're not on edge. Okay. Then they're probably not as sick.
Mm,
Right. I mean, some of these families that I've gone into have just the physical symptoms as well of all that stress. And then that focus is all on the kid again. Uh, but those are some of the things that I typically see, and the big thing I see is just a miseducation. They just we're leading them down the wrong. We're not giving the leaders what they need to succeed. We're telling them, in a family's case, be punitive, be external motivation. Kids don't need that. We don't require that when we're in the right environment. We want to thrive. Every single one of us want to thrive. We just need the environment to do so. And I do believe that wholeheartedly, because when you have a
huh.
good leader, what it is, whether a company or a family, we took a lot of slack, my wife and I, for not having a lot of rules with our kids. We had values, and they'll know what those values are, but we didn't preach them from the mountaintop. We lived them out, and they are still the values. If you brought my kids in here today, they would tell you. Um, this is kind of what we live by, and they're internally motivated, right? They're very internally motivated. I don't got to get on them. I don't have to. We never got on them for, uh, not cleaning the room. It was always clean. We lived those out. They saw it,
Mm,
and they were comfortable enough where we could have that communication back and forth, and it's created. Now my kids are out of the house.
wow.
Some parents are complaining about their kids never leaving. I want mine back because they're pretty cool. Or even just the little things. I mean, they don't live very far away. My daughter is only 4 miles away, but she stopped over the other night. It's just I love to see them and love to hear what they're doing every week. It's just kind of something new. And talking about that, I mean, my son, again, from that internal motivation piece, I mean, he had 2 years of college in before he graduated high school. My daughter graduated high school at 16, and then she
Whoa.
graduated college at 20. She wasn't even legal when she graduated college. They both got jobs, and they're doing well. And I'm not
Wow.
saying that to brag. I'm saying that because for people listening to this, Jay, that's important to understand, because as a leader, if you can't get internally yourself right, doesn't matter what tactic or thing you're going to use. You have to be, that genuine and authentic to who you are, but you have to get to a point of responsibility, right? And I'm
Mm.
not saying you have to do it all the time. Like, there are times when we falter, but people will give you grace if they see that you're doing the right thing by yourself and for them.
What are some of the diminishing returns you've seen when it's not values driven in action, but rules obsessed in word and speech or mandates?
And yeah, that's a great question, because you can have a, a company or whatever function like that, even a home. But the
Yeah.
problem is you have lack of engagement, and there's not a willingness to probably do more, to go above and beyond. It's just, here's what we do. There's a lot of complaining, backbiting. You're going to have it amongst the troops, so to speak. So whether that's in a company or with a family, you're gonna have a lot of that, and it creates a poor culture, right? Nobody wants to be there. And this is why some people dread Thanksgiving so much, because we don't want to get together with our families, because it's the same physiological bull crap, so to speak. It's the diminishing returns. Like, why should I do this and make myself miserable when this is what we've always done. Like,
The were how difficult was it working around adoption?
it wasn't for me. I mean, it was sad.
Mm.
I think it was more frustrating for me because of how different I was versus here's how we do it. But for me, it was natural because everything that I taught and still teach about that, I went through. Goes back to your quote. Like I started becoming a national expert in reactive attachment disorder. And, as I'm looking at all this stuff and all this material, I'm like, holy crap, this is me. Like
Wow.
I wasn't adopted or in foster care, but like, this is what I've got attachment issues. Holy cow. So does everybody else. And you know what? So do a lot of leaders. It makes them really good at what they do, but then they can't lead effectively because they have all this reactivity. And
Hmm.
I found it to be a joy because there were some staff out there that really embraced it at the different places that I was at, and they worked it because they knew it validated them. So that was a positive there. But I think why it wasn't so difficult for me. Now there were difficult times, but what made it great was the hope that you gave people. And sometimes that's all an adoptive or foster parent needs, or just a parent. It's just to tell them, like, your kid's gonna be okay. Like that, the gold coin that sits right here. How many times did I tell those parents, right? He's gonna be all right. He's gonna be fine. You don't have to believe me, and you can come against me right now and tell me you don't believe me. But I guarantee if you called them up right now, the single most thing that they would say after I left their house after the first 3 days together was he gave us hope.
Hmm.
And that's all you need. It's just like, can we do this? And there's a glimmer instead of that old traditional model. It was like, because for some of those kids, especially older boys, the model way back when was like, hey, they can't change, so just bite the bullet, so to speak. And that's like, ugh, that's I can't be very hopeful with that kind of
Wow.
thinking.
That's sad. What is reactive attachment disorder?
So reactive attachment disorder in the DSM-4, basically, all right, to kind of make this to dumb it down a little bit, really is when how I explain it is when we struggle in relationships with other people, especially those people that are close to us. And this is why a lot of times you'll get either in like a residential treatment facility, but it happens a lot like in foster care and adoption, you'll get the honeymoon period. All right. Which is coming in, everything's great. Everything's great. It's much like what you see with employees. You get the honeymoon period. And then,
Great.
oh, boom, it's like, what the? We adopted that. I don't want them anymore. Get them out of here. Um,
Wow.
and it's so funny because it has so much correlation to the business world, because these kids start and they're great and they can take so much, and then they absorb all that stress that's going on. And for some of them, they have not had a paradigm where actually somebody's loved them. So they got to push to make sure it's true, but their
Hmm.
pushing creates the environment that gets them
When you
pushed
say
out.
push, let me get this straight. Let's say they're a bit older. Maybe there was a scenario prior to this acceptance into a new culture where there may have been a lack of what you just said. Uh, let's say a lack of love to keep it simple.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're getting an overemphasis of it. Maybe they'll rebel to see if it's real or not, and then that could create a downward spiral of conflict, kind of thing. Is that
Mm-hmm.
what you mean by that?
Yeah, and typically, at least the couples that I've counseled and have done therapy with, there's that back and forth that we uncover too, because couples do that, and it doesn't have to be couples that have had severe trauma. They will do that. Like, it's almost, and I actually had a conversation yesterday with someone about this. He said he doesn't trust. It's like too good. He's like, I when it gets too good, I start self sabotaging. I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, welcome to the club. Right? We don't trust it. We go back to what is comfortable. We go back to our status quo. And if that status quo was, trusting in myself, being in survival all the time, we'll create that scenario unconsciously. And a lot of times that's what these kids do. And then if it doesn't get corrected, this is what we see in the work environments too. It's like, why did that person do that? I
Wow.
had one young man uh, several years ago went out and got off heroin, was doing really well, was sober for the longest time, got a great job. The night he got the offer from the great job, he went out, got some heroin, killed himself, just overdosed. And my guess would be that it was just too overwhelming for him. I finally made it, just went back to what he knew, unfortunately. And we see that too often. It's like we make it hard. It's supposed to be simple, but we make it hard. That it we've learned it's not true, but we've learned that it's hard. And therefore, when it starts to get easy, sometimes we make it difficult again. We have to have, you know, this difficulty sometimes. We create more drama from our trauma.
On page 19 of the Life of Victory,
Mm-hmm.
um, we have a dichotomy of love and fear.
Right.
So love is on the left hand side of the page if I'm reading it, and fear is on the right. And so we have internal motivation is under love and external motivation is under fear. What do you mean by that?
So external motivation is something outside of me making me do something. Internal motivation is, so example, external
Mm.
motivation is the boss says I have to be there at 8. That stress gets me up and gets me going. Looks like it works. Internal motivation gets me there at 7:45 because I want to be there and I want to work. I want to show up. Um, for a kid, that could be I want to clean my room just because that's what I want. Not that I have to have some dumb sticker chart, right? And I mean, it's so crazy when you think about it. I mean, I could really get on a soapbox, but think about that. Like, would you ever advise me to have a sticker chart for my wife? I mean, wonder how that would work, Jay. Right?
That sounds like King. That's a different podcast. I can't I can't wait to meet Tammy.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, can you imagine? I mean, I would just get busted in the chops and be like, yeah, right. Like, why can't you do this better? Did you do this? Did you, did
Can't no, that's a great analogy. That's good.
and then why would I want to do it? Why would I want to do it? Like my son this year, he actually called me the other day, last week. He's like, Dad, hey, look, um, I'm doing my own taxes this year. Like, I don't want you to help me anymore.
Wow.
Right. And this is only his, he got married um a year and a half ago. So, we help him out a little bit. We don't even help him out a whole lot, but that was one of those things that he wants to do it on his own because he gets more satisfaction out of doing it on its own. And especially nowadays, we take that away from kids, and that's why they're so depressed, so
Mm.
anxious, so so low in esteem, and also probably why they're committing suicide at rates that we've never heard of.
How about this distinction, the contrast of influence and control?
Yeah. So think about your relationships. Do you want to be a boss that has to control everything and micromanage everything, or do you want to have the influence where people come and because you've served them, it gets reciprocated back. You have enough influence where people and you take enough responsibility where other people come in and take the same kind of responsibility. And then you don't have to manage them, and then you don't have to carrot and stick them all the time. They want to do it, and that creates an open unit for everybody to succeed.
Based on what you said earlier about, for example, your household, hey, we don't have rules, but we have values that we embody. Would you say that that's then influencing as opposed to the rules falls under the control? I want to make sure I understand you
Correct.
properly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the order matters for you.
The order
Like
of
order meaning the order of living what the living the values
oh, absolutely.
versus talking about them.
Yeah. I mean, you've run into leaders that just talk, 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 and don't walk. Um,
Yeah, it reminds me of when they little kids are potty training and they're talking about peeing and pooping, like and then they finally can do it on their own.
mm-hmm,
The leaders will talk before they actualize
mm-hmm,
but the question is, that gulf, right, between speech and doing. How big is it, or will it ever happen? How about this scarcity abundance? Because yeah, I'm looking at this chart. It's awesome.
mm-hmm.
Anyone listening to this podcast, the Life of Victory on page 19, it'll give you a clear distinction between fear and love. So
Yeah.
scarcity falls under fear,
Mm-hmm.
and abundance falls under love. So this is, if I learned from your book, reactivity. If I'm reacting, I'm in a scarcity mindset. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Where there's not enough, where you're just physiologically you're coming from a place of fear, and it's also mindset, right? Um, when you live in an abundant mindset. So I'll give you an example. This is an exact thing that I've done with parents, especially with kids that have been adopted who have not gotten um, the right nutrition most of their life. They haven't been fed correctly. These
Wow.
kids will, they'll start breaking in to the cupboards, and then of course the parents, lock it up. I'm like, they're gonna find a way. Like they're in survival. They will find a way. uh, and the kids, some of these kids are actually overweight, and they sit down to the dinner table and they just scarf it, scarf it, scarf it, scarf it down, and they're constantly wanting more. A scarcity mindset would say, limit all that, so they don't get whatever overweight, something like that, or whatever their thought is, where their parents are coming from, and whoever has told them to do that. An abundance mindset, and I've done this, right? And the parents that have followed it have all succeeded with it. Let that kid eat until they're full. And the moment they're full, you reach over and give them another scoop of whatever it is. What
Wow.
if they don't eat it? That's the point. Because what you're doing is you're telling their mind there's always enough. And,
Wow.
and that's what you can say as you lay that next scoop down. There's always enough here. There's always going to be enough, because they don't believe there is enough. And that's why they're reacting. So the moment you're reacting towards them, you're just recreating that in the future of them hoarding food and things like that. The moment that they know that there's enough, they just stop.
Wow.
And that's what, you think about the dynamics that would look like in a workplace. When people get what they need out of the environment and there's enough, whether that's just giving them what they need emotionally, a lot of the times just
Hmm.
treating them how they need to be treated, then they're happy. And there's not a lot of complaining or doing anything like that. It creates a great environment.
I want your thoughts on this. You think that you think it's connected where you see someone that was a high performer, they're kind of checked out and they're doing something else. Would that be a good analogy to this example of the child that's,
Good. Yeah.
you see what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
that idea that it's they're searching for more because it's fulfilling some kind of internal void.
Hmm.
If the employee within the organization is missing the something of like a purpose alignment, or they
Hmm.
don't feel safe in the environment, or a combination, they might be taking their energy
Oh, they'll definitely take their energy
outside,
elsewhere.
right? And all of a sudden they're doing like a bunch of things outside and not living to their potential within the ecosystem. I'm curious if you see the connection between that psychology, or is it a bit
Yeah.
of a stretch? I'm just trying to make the connection, because
Yeah.
I
I mean,
see this in that context. I think,
mhm.
based on what you're saying,
Yeah.
in the home with the child.
Yeah, I mean, sure, when people aren't getting fulfilled and getting what they need out of any environment. So whether that's they don't, I mean, it could come down to just a simple fact that they don't understand the purpose or their purpose there, or that they're appreciated. Like when you take a high performer, a lot of times we don't spend as much time with the high performers because they're performing. So that, they slowly just kind of fade
Paradox.
away sometimes. And when we pour into them, when we give them what they need, then they step up. And that's, so a lot of times it doesn't take much.
I'm writing this
You know,
down. We don't spend a lot of time. We don't spend No, we don't spend a lot of time with the high performers because they're performing.
yeah,
It's so funny.
yeah.
Hey, it's good. I mean, that's a profound thought.
And that goes back to that scarcity and abundant mindset. We focus on the negativity out of just scarcity. We're afraid of, this. Let's say it's an employee again. Like, how many crummy employees get all the attention? And then we're not paying attention to the ones that, like, why don't we just create another one of these? Or what if I supported this person and they could really excel if I stopped giving them all these negative people to work with, and I
Mm.
stopped paying attention to these negative people and I focus my attention on where the abundance is at.
What's your take on how to on that gray area between helping someone that's not living to their potential in the organization and helping them find another organization to support and be supported by? That gray,
Um,
I feel like it's a gray world that
yeah.
I'm navigating in the tenure of my evolution,
Hmm.
in the service industry, right? As a professional, this gray,
Hmm.
like, so how do you view that
So go
realm?
back to the love and fear thing. I'll give you two
Sure.
more words. And I don't think these two are in the book, but they're under other things as well. But there's a difference between enabling behavior and empowering behavior. All right. When you constantly do something for somebody that's externally motivating, when you're not having them learn, or you're putting up with behavior that doesn't fit, say, your values, you're enabling that behavior to continue. When you give them an out or say, hey, look, you either get on board and this is how I'm going to help you, or you're out, that's empowering. So there's that difference between enabling behavior, because we stick with that crummy egg a lot of times because, well, we're afraid, how are we going to replace them, or what if they sue us, or it could be a litany of excuses. We just don't want to do it. Right? That's enabling that, and that's enabling that behavior and allowing that to continue. When you empower that person, you're saying, hey, look, you've got whatever accountability. You got 30 days to improve it. I'm going to help you. Here's how I'm going to help you in that 30 days. If we can't correct this, if we can't course correct, we're going to agree that we're going to cut bait here.
I love this so much. You got to come back to the show. Like, we got to do this all the time because we can go deep on this. So I
We
want
can't
your
go deep
thoughts
on
on
a lot
this.
of things that you say.
I want this, brother. Like, this is like my purgatory right here. Here we go. What about this? What if so this I look, because I agree. Okay, the enabling, right? That's like, it reminds me of the quote, or the sentiment. an omission is as menacious as a lie, or like, there's a weird word, but like malevolent
Mhm.
or self-defeating or toxic. Insert, right? Insert negative. So that's where I hear enabling, the
Mhm.
avoidance of the direct truth. And you said, I wrote this down, empowering, like, hey, get on board. So I'm hearing direct communication, or get out. Let's say, or this is what's going to happen. That this is,
Mhm.
we're telling the truth here. That's what I'm hearing, right? Direct communication. Well, what if a percentage of those that get that direct communication from a patriarchal or matriarchal figure, so like some senior person, a percentage of those don't get on board, right? So they just go start their own company. Like, I just, if that's the case, because right, they didn't fit into one culture, so they started
Mhm.
one. I wouldn't, if I'm them, I wouldn't have a positive emotion or positive framework of engaging with reality in the context of that relationship, because I was on the receiving end, meaning I got the truth, and maybe I couldn't reconcile it.
Mhm.
So, or I either leave, I self-select, or I'm asked to leave. But now I leave, I start my own thing.
Could happen.
So let's say it does, right? I The question becomes, which side am I more likely to fit on when I'm in that position of power? The enabler or the empower? I think that specific individual is more likely to become the enabler until they learn how to empower, because
Mhm.
they have a negative emotion associated with, likely, when they were the outlier. Because, right, every company companies are started from people that were once followers of something else. Like, so I don't know, I'm curious what you think of
Well, if you think about it
or
too,
what comes to
you
mind.
could, you know, when we talk about love and fear, it's also the difference between, are you living in truth or are you living in a lie? If you could have the truth done out of love and influence, that person can still leave somewhere, or you even set the tone. I actually have a company that I've worked with for years, and I actually just was with the gentleman a few weeks ago, and have the utmost respect for him because he would actually say it at the beginning when he met with new employees. He's like, "We want you to be your best. If it's not here, we will help you with that next
Wow.
stage in your life. We want you." And what happened then was, even in the people that did leave, they still spoke highly of the company and of him and that leader, still to this day. And he was just very truthful up front, and did it also in a place where they weren't reactive, because that's they're the least stressed typically when you're just starting out. There's not a lot of expectations, so he would throw that out at the beginning, and just say, "Hey, look, this is what we abide by." Uh, and I think when you have that, like we have 5 core values that everybody gets measured against, even myself, right? And we give each other a score every quarter. And, no, let's be truthful. Was I doing that? Like, was I living up to that? If not, maybe I need some help. And because we're all in it together. Um, but I do think that person, if they don't understand that, they're going to be more reactive and more enabling, and they're just going to hire people that they need to enable and are enablers themselves.
What are some ways you've seen people break that pattern that are in positions of leadership?
I mean, you got to do the internal work. The best ones. Well, I guess I'm a little biased because those are the ones I've worked with, right? And yeah, I've got a couple great friends out of those too, because those
Wow.
are those are kind of some lifelong relationships. I know for me, being a better leader is just doing the internal work. Like, why did I react to that? Why did I, when I leave some place, I'm always asking myself, whose world was I in the most? Was I in their world, or was I in my own? Like, was it about me? I also go back to, again, if you want two more words for the difference between love and fear, I often go, from a spiritual place, it's either ego, right, fear based, or spirit. Was I just living in um, a good spot? Was I thriving in that spot? Was I emanating good vibes? And did I leave that person feeling the same way? And if not, where do I need to course correct? What did this person teach me that I need to learn?
How do you view apologies?
How do I view apologies? If they're genuine, they're great, right? I mean, when somebody's being genuine with that, I will say that over and over again about the same thing is not apology. That's just a bad habit, and you're just trying to get out of it. So I want the apology with some kind of progress or improvement, and not just for other people. I want it for myself. So if I apologize, I've got to zone in on that. How can I improve? This person really, I apologize to him. I don't want to have to apologize again for the same thing. Right. So I'm looking for the improvement side of that.
What great advice. In closing, part one of 100, which chapter would you say someone's opening up this book, right? The Life of Victory, Mastering the Secret of Choosing Love Over Fear. In busy world, what chapter is someone starting with?
There's a bunch I could pick, Jay. I think it's chapter 6 where I talk about the reticular activating system and the power of that. And I think we all need that, and we need to teach kids how to use that, especially since they can imagine so much greater than we can. But really, it comes back to the first question in the book: is, are you crazy? Um, because for the longest time, I thought I was nuts until I realized that there are people out there that want to improve, that want to get better, that want to love, um, that want to give back to the world, that want to create a legacy, and they just show up in the darndest of places, you
Hmm.
know. And that's how I met you. I met a guy who I vibed with, and one of the first things that Brian said to me, I remember on the bus, when we were leaving, and this was just we're just first meeting, and I shook his hand. I stood up. I don't know what made me stand up on the bus and shake his hand. And he's like, "Have we met before?" It was
Wow.
the darndest thing. And I'm like, "Feel like it? I don't think so." But as I immediately turned to Tammy, and I'm like, "Do I know him? I feel like I do." And then we went through
Wow.
the Grand Canyon together, 25 miles, just chatting all the way. And it felt like, I mean, I left like I found my long lost brother.
Wow.
And then when I went in to meet with him, you happen to be up there. You don't even live anywhere near his office. And he's like, "Hey, look, I want you to meet Jay." And it's like, bang, here's another guy, right? That's like my tribe. And these guys are just as crazy, if not crazier than I am. So welcome to the club, right? And I think it's just validating for those people that want to go out, that want to, leave a ding in the world, that, want to change the world, be that's inside of you. That's how we're hardwired to be, is just, we're not hardwired to for all this reactivity, this stress. We're hardwired for relationship, we're hardwired for love, we're hardwired for connection. Just be that. Like, not everybody's going to do it, right? I'm not naive, but there are a few people out there that are just as crazy as you are, that want to make a change in the world, and we can do it together.
I have a quote I want to share with you. Here it is. By the way, I'd be happy if I knew how to use my phone. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Oh, I didn't know you were coming out with that. That made my hair stand up on my arms.
Yeah, I just read that this morning. I was like, God, that's a
Wow.
good one. I never heard of that before. Because you're talking about love a lot, and I like that, right? As a person in search for identity and love. I think this is my meditation. This whole
Hmm.
business, trying to find my culture. So of course, culture matters.
Hmm.
You're talking about love, and
Yeah,
yeah,
you
I
want to talk
read that.
about the ultimate from where the quote comes, the ultimate sacrifice through love.
That's what I take. That's what I took from hearing that. Um, so I'm excited for this adventure, brother. I'm so happy that you came on today.
Yeah, thanks
We
for having
barely
me.
scraped the surface, which is
I know. I know. I know.
we'll
It's
we'll
very
have to
exciting.
do it again. Anyone listening to this, follow Eric. Um, please leave a review on the Culture Matters podcast. Please share this to one person that you have the most disdain for,
Wow.
in the spirit of love.
I like it.
Maybe
I
there's
love it.
something you guys can, or you people can talk about. And in closing, Eric, what would you say is one thing you want our audience to do um, today, right now?
Go out and be the best version of yourself. Go out and love somebody, right? Just go do it. Like it does, don't think about it. Just do it. Regardless of what anybody else is doing, just walk in it.
Hmm. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
We will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast.